Trying to see if I'm connected here. All right, so I said I would come back on with Dane Wigington, and I am going to, I believe we're on here. I'm going to introduce Dane. He has a background in solar energy. He's a former employee of Bechtel Power Corp and was a licensed contractor in California and Arizona. He has been engaged in constant climate geoengineering research for the last 15 years, and so I'm actually, because I've heard a lot about him, so I'm excited, that he's taken time to be here with me. And just many of you already know who he is, but I'm going to share this with you for those of you who don't. But Dane he puts all his focus. He's put all his focus and efforts and energy in researching climate engineering issue with when he began to lose significant amount of solar uptake due to the ever-increasing solar obfuscation caused by jet aircraft spraying in the skies. You know what? I'm going to let him touch on that one right there and kind of explain that. So because Dane Wigington lives in Northern California, and it's off the grid. So getting him on video was going to be a challenge, but I've got him on the phone, so hopefully the reception is going to be good. If it's not, then what we're going to do is go on at another time and record this, do it, maybe pre-record it on a venue that will be, the sound will be better. So, Dane, do you want to introduce yourself here a little bit beyond what I've shared, and just see how the reception is for others who are listening?
Hopefully you can hear me, Austin. I appreciate your courage, excuse me, with addressing this issue in an arena where the blowback, as you've already experienced, is immense, because this is the issue they'll try to keep down the most. Is this audibility coming through okay?
Yeah, can you guys hear Dane okay?
Sorry,
so I'm getting thumbs up.
Here, but I mean, how's that right now? If this audio is okay, I can keep up.
Okay, so let me.
Press on.
Okay, and let me do this. I'm going to try two ways. See if you guys okay. So Dottie says it's okay, and I'm going to adjust it and maybe put my phone on the desk and see if that helps at all to improve it. So far it's okay. Can you go ahead and try once more, Dane?
Yeah. How's that, Austin? Hopefully, I have a solid landline on this end, so hopefully it's okay, and I'll talk a little loud. Does that sound all right?
Okay, this actually sounds a little bit better where I put it. I don't know if it does for everyone else. So thumbs up the way it was. Okay, so it sounds like this is fine. So yeah, the pushback has been extraordinary.
Here's the bottom line, especially in the arenas that you're in. We must stick to the science terms and know the science terms, and they are not easily marginalized, because the entire scientific community all over the globe is discussing climate engineering, geoengineering, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection. If you know the science terms, and even the two most basic and simple to remember, climate engineering, solar radiation management, two of the primary terms, those terms are not easily marginalized. The quote chemtrails term, non-science term, goes nowhere. And those who stick to that term are not helping the credibility of our cause. And those who believe that term has some validity, because Dennis Kucinich once used it in some proposed legislation, there was still no basis for the word. Others, Austin, refer to a, quote, chemtrails manual from the U.S. Air Force. That was for first-year cadets chemistry class, had nothing whatsoever to do with solar radiation management or geoengineering. So, again, it's important for people, when they're trying to share information, share credible information from a credible source. Otherwise, it's just muddying the water and confusing people and really robbing credibility from the issue.
Okay, and I appreciate it. And one thing that you and I discussed is and what I appreciate about you is you're just leaving this open. You said ask anything, and so what I want this to be is an honest dialogue, and so when I share with you, I'll be sharing from my honest perspective, just to emphasize that. And so hearing, because this is something that you've been researching for many years, and these are things for me as I've been going through a discovery process that is that's relatively new. I've been in the know, I would say, for a few years now. I've been maybe one of those people who you might consider as muddy in the waters because of my position. And again, I'm always open. I truly am to mutual understanding, correction, wherever it's due, and being open to a wide variety of counsel in areas of expertise that I don't have, that I'm not well studied in. That being said, from my perspective as a layperson in this is, and then tell me your position, okay? But I know that these toxins, that is irrefutable, that these toxins are being sprayed in the air, and I know that obviously you know all of this, but these toxins are being sprayed in the air, and they're literally chemicals that are entering into our atmosphere, into our soil, and we are actually ingesting it. And the idea, I've shared before, my brother's a commercial pilot, my father was a pilot, my other brother was a pilot, so aviation was in the family. My father was an aerospace engineer. Just the idea of contrails, that since they're coming out the same way, and it's chemicals, chemtrails, to be honest with you, from my perspective, it was like a perfect term. It just, to me, connotes the reality of it. And geoengineering, from my perspective, it connotes something somehow scientific that somehow can be justified by the governments that be. But I don't think that's what you're saying at all when you and I've spoken. You're just saying, look, this is nefarious, but this is the terms that's going to give us a better representation and acceptance into the scientific community, so that what we're sharing is it's better received.
It can't be so easily marginalized, and that's the point. And it's imperative to remember that the vast majority of those involved with these programs either believe or choose to accept the official narrative that they're being told that these programs are, in fact, something necessary, something for the common good. Just like the pilot flying a C-130 in Vietnam, dumping Agent Orange on his own comrade, his fellow U.S. Military soldier on the ground, was told that don't worry, it won't harm that soldier. Just like the soldiers that were told to put on a set of goggles and go watch the nuclear blast detonated in Nevada, and we now know this is a new study, that those blasts killed indirectly some 400,000 Americans. So the bottom line is the vast majority that are involved with these programs are being told they're doing something for the greater good. Many of those people choose to believe that's true when it's not true. So the bottom line is those at the very top understand the severity of what we face. And this is where many, even in the anti-geoengineering community, are not acknowledging the degree of biosphere implosion that's happening right now. Many are pretending or painting a picture that somehow if we just stop climate engineering, everything will be fine. That's not true. That's not reality. That doesn't gain us credibility. We have the environmentalist communities ignoring the climate engineering issue because they don't want to be associated with the issue because there's not enough credibility with the dissemination happening on this issue. If we can change that equation and disseminate credible data and recognize, yes, the planet's horrifically damaged, the climate's horrifically damaged, there are many causes, but climate engineering, single greatest causal factor, and for those in the environmental communities, if we can stick to a simple narrative when we're trying to reach them, the narrative is this.
Right.
How can we have any legitimate discussion about the state of the climate without discussing climate engineering first and foremost? And this is important, and I'll give the mic back to you, Austin. How can we have any legitimate discussion about climate engineering without discussing one of the most major aspects of climate engineering, and that is chemical ice nucleation for weather modification? Patented chemical ice nucleation processes that can turn what should have been a warmer rain event into a progressively colder frozen precipitation event. These are patented processes, and we need people in the anti-climate engineering community to recognize that these engineered cooldowns are exactly that, engineered. And when they pretend that they're not engineered, one, that doesn't help the fight to expose climate engineering, and two, that supports the false narrative that there's nothing wrong with the climate because, oh, look how cold it is. And in doing that and following that narrative, that's exactly the narrative the climate engineers and the power structure want. So, two important points. Can't discuss state of the climate legitimately without first and foremost discussing climate engineering using the science terms climate engineering legitimately without including chemical isonucleation for weather modification, engineered cool downs.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, and I do want to share with the viewers. I would ignore the trolls. There's absolutely shills. They're hired. They're going to be on there. They're going to try to distract, and so really, so I will deal with that later on as I go through, and but that's just the reality. We're going to have people out there deliberately trying to derail really a movement by the people, or at least to get information out. And so, I shared with you, Dane, that as you know, that I'm running for state senate, and it was funny because you sent me an email that if that where I'm delving into, even looking at bringing out the idea of geoengineering, that I'm gonna, it gives us that opportunity to age faster, and I would say the same thing, even going into politics, for anyone who wants to represent the truth and represent the people. What I've discovered what I did is I just started to try to hear the people as a citizen, watching the direction that we were going in, and recognizing that politicians were not speaking out against, taxes are important, all these different things, a budget, balanced budget, and there's so many things that are important. But when we look at the idea that there's poisons that are being put in our atmosphere, that's something that applies to all of us. And the more I started looking at the idea that these toxins were being sprayed in our air, and how damaging it is, to me it was imperative that representatives of the people, they start speaking out against it. And what I've discovered is that the representatives who are in office now, they pretend like they don't even know what it is, or that it actually is happening. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly this is a fight for life, and it's imperative people understand that. So many people right now, the vast majority of people, whether they're elected officials or the common citizen, are arranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The reality we've all known, and I don't care who believes me or who doesn't believe me, who rolls their eyes and walks away. That's not my business. I can't convince somebody to investigate the facts, but I'm going to state them anyway. Our current reality will not be this way much longer, and that's a mathematical certainty. I don't care what we do at this point. With the momentum that's behind the biosphere implosion that's unfolding by the day right now, no matter what we do, the reality we've known is going to change. Now, one thing we can do to affect that change for the better, doesn't mean our problems will be over, but the single greatest leap we can take in the right direction, for all the reasons you just stated, is to expose and halt climate engineering. And if we could expose it, and thus expose every single individual in academia, in elected offices, who has toed the line for the official lie, it would overturn everything. And they know this. That's why they're trying so hard to hide this issue, so hard to marginalize anybody who addresses this issue. And that's why, again, to gain traction, it's so important not to point at the sky and rant and rave, or to try to disseminate facts that you're not familiar enough with, whether it's anybody. If you're not familiar enough to answer the questions appropriately, pass on credible data that leads to more credible data, and that's why we try to put that data out. We put out 1 million color glossy flyers, hard facts on those flyers. Facts like this: why is there an illegal federal gag order? And this is a good one to throw at anybody who denies this issue. Why, if there's nothing going on, why is there an illegal federal gag order on all National Weather Service and all NOAA employees, gagging the weathermen? That's the kind of facts people need to hear. Why do we have almost 800-page Senate documents, which we have posted to geoengineeringwatch.org, and we've downloaded these documents so they can't be scrubbed off the internet. And we've highlighted the most important sections so you can look through this easily. Massive, if people search, if your listeners search geoengineeringwatch.org massive Senate document, read that and tell me it's not happening. It documents the fact that there's 10 major universities involved, 12 federal agencies, countries around the world. It outlines the cooperation between countries, even normally opposing countries. There is very, very damning data in this document. In fact, the document calls for total blanket immunity from prosecution for anyone involved with these programs. Wow. We have the data, and you must pass on that kind of data if you expect to not be marginalized. So, again, yes, it's a fight for life, a very immediate fight for life. And not only are we being poisoned, as you correctly stated, Austin, we have the biosphere being literally torn apart. Ozone
Right.
layer destruction. Austin, have you just seen the recent reports that said the ozone layer was getting better?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so the narrative that the ozone hole layer is getting better is no different than the narrative that we're only seeing condensation trails in the sky, which is a blatant, glaring lie that anybody who has not disconnected their sense of reason could figure out. You don't have grid patterns in the sky one day and nothing the next if there's not something going on. You don't have up-close images that we have at geoengineeringwatch.org. We have up-close photos of the nozzles on the aircraft aimed at the exhaust jet stream. We have really film footage that is shocking and inarguable, on top of the documents, on top of the patents, on top of the gag order that I just mentioned. I mean, there's reams and reams of data. But in regard to things like the ozone layer recovery, let's look at how long we're going to be here on the current course. The ozone layer recovery narrative is a blatant, glaring lie the population chooses to believe because it feels good to believe that everything's fine. We have right now, with the current rate of ozone destruction, perhaps 8 to 10 years until total ozone layer collapse. Game over. Anybody who pays attention to their sense of feel, you can feel the burning, searing UV radiation. We're not only looking at massively elevated UVB, we're looking at UVC on the surface. That's the last spectrum of UV radiation before X-ray. I think we all know how harmful X-rays are. UVC is in many ways just as harmful. We're talking about DNA-damaging bands of UV radiation. We have peer-reviewed study to prove it's sunburning whales' backs, sunburning fish, scorching trees.
Right. And you're so that's pretty alarming, really. I mean, when I look at this, to me, it's absolutely a reasonable. You're saying 8 to 10 years. What can happen in 8 to 10 years?
Total ozone layer collapse. We're already seeing.
So if that happens, that would be the end.
It's game over.
Game
for all
over.
terrestrial life and most aquatic life. And right now, let's look at where we're at right now today. Because when you say 8 to 10 years, people think, oh, okay, we got 8 to 10 years to figure out what to do. No, that's not the case. We are already free-falling well into the 6th great mass extinction. So right now, today, here's where we're at today. In the last 40 years, we've lost 60% of Earth's wildlife populations. There are many, many causes. I'm not pinning that all on climate engineering, but
Right.
Climate engineering, environmentally speaking, is the single most destructive factor on the planet today. The greatest threat we face on the planet today, short of nuclear cataclysm. So we've lost 60% of Earth's wildlife populations. Plankton populations are down 60%. In the case of plankton, even though we have Fukushima, we have nitrates pouring into the oceans, we have superheating oceans, we have a lot of problems, but the destroyed ozone layer and the increased UV is likely the single greatest cause of plankton die-off, which is down also 60%. Plankton is the greatest supplier of oxygen on the planet. Oxygen content atmospherically plummeting right now. We have oxygen levels in some of the urban areas that are within a few percentage points of being extremely dangerously low. We are losing our boreal forests. Now, everybody knows the forests are burning to the ground, and we have the environmentalists blaming that only on climate change. That's not true. Not that the climate's not changing and warming, but the single greatest factor, again, along with plankton die-off, with forest fires, single greatest causal factor, climate engineering. Why? Bioavailable metals, aluminum, barium, strontium, lead, manganese, pouring down through the air column, primary elements used in climate engineering, toxifying soils, changing soil pHs, and we have peer-reviewed study, in the case of aluminum, to prove that it stops nutrient uptake in plants and trees. They die a slow death. They're being burned from the top with the intense UV. The hydrological cycle, the rain cycle is being cut off. We have an incendiary dust. These metals are incendiaries. They're coating the foliage. The atmosphere is more electrically conductive because of these metallic particles. Thus, we have more dry lightning. From every direction, climate engineering is the single greatest causal factor for the burn downs all over the globe. Let's follow that feedback loop so people understand how lethal geoengineering is. So now we have untold hundreds of millions of tons of carbon pumping into the atmosphere. We have the surface of land that's now black and thus absorbs even more heat. We have the soot from these fires settling in the polar regions, which makes the ice dark, makes it absorb more light, more heat. Feedback loops, of which there's about 50 going on right now, that are accelerating us toward near-term planetary omnicide. So why am I focused on this issue? Because it's the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat. If we don't deal with this,
Right.
not only are we sucking in, back to your original statement, Austin, not only are we sucking in toxic heavy metals with every breath that are making us sicker and dumber by the day, the biosphere and its life support systems are being systematically torn apart.
Right. Well, that's how I see it also when I was looking at priorities. You know, some of the things that I discuss, I've been told not to speak about it because people are going to think you're crazy and you're not going to get elected. But the way I see it is that if people are unwilling to open their eyes now, then a representative going in and trying to speak truth without the backing of the people, it's that person's going to be ineffective.
That's a very good point. And when someone has the courage to do what you're doing, people need to get off the bench and actually help. Actually get behind you and help do what you're doing. Maybe perhaps show up at the Capitol and distribute credible data. And we offer that data, geoengineeringwatch.org, for our approximate cost of printing and packing and shipping. And we offer free links, free downloadable links for people to print their own for free.
Right, right.
We're simply trying to offer the tools to effectively wake others up.
Right.
Tools with data that can't be denied, photographs that can't
Okay,
be denied.
so let me, if I may, ask you this, Dane. So there's no question that the data is there, that we know that literally there's poisons that are being sprayed in the air. We know that, and it's irrefutable. And what's so troubling and what's so difficult to grasp is that this is a worldwide effort against, I mean, what's the purpose? I mean, who is behind this? And again, we also see so many people who are defending it, shills who are hired, trolls or whatever, agents. And yet, I look at the Capitol and I see these, going with your term, the geoengineering clouds or whatever, that they're above the Capitol. So it's like the very people who are protecting the powers that be, that are spraying these poisons in our air, they're suffering also. How is this actually happening? That we're watching literally our world being destroyed, poisons being sprayed in the air, and it's we, the people, who are giving the manpower to enable whoever it is that's doing it.
It's always been so. There's always been legions of order followers in society that even to the result of their own demise will do what they're told by someone they perceive to be an authority, as we discussed off air.
Right.
And people need to understand this. And so many people can't get their arms around this issue because they say this. They say the proverbial they,
right.
do this to themselves. And I ask people who try to stand on that argument to consider reality, to consider what they have done to themselves all along, from, again, the detonation of over 2,000 nuclear weapons all over the globe, contaminating everything, including the proverbial they, which we're talking about the people who really run the central bankers. That's the top of the food chain. Those who control the central bankers. Central bankers printing any amount of money for anything they want, thus they control militaries, they control countries. So we're talking about a few people at the top that really control everything. The rest down the line, if they think it's good for their own personal paradigm, they will follow orders until the brutal, bitter end, like pirates filling their pockets with loot while the ship goes down, as if that loot will help or save them. We're facing right now, again, planetary omnicide, not just ecocide, not just genocide, omnicide, total die-off.
Oh.
And again, those who don't believe that, you're not looking at facts. You're not looking at data. You're not looking at statistics. And I want to point this out on the statistics end. This equation is as nonlinear as it could possibly be. Many people, and even those in academia who are really paid to pacify populations, they look backward at a statistic and try to calculate, well, it's taken 200 years for this much to happen, therefore it'll take another 100 years for that much to happen. That's not true. That's not reality.
Right.
It's an exponential equation. When the fuse burns down to the explosive happens and it's game over.
Right.
The fuse is just about burn out right now. The equation is non-linear. So for people who think that they can hide from this issue and go on about their lives, think again.
Right.
You'd be very surprised if we make it very many more weeks or months before headlines that are so significant
it
can't be hidden.
Right. Right. You know, the interesting thing also is that we can have the evidence right in front of us, and I find people who are arguing, or the shills or the trolls that show up and using logical fallacy, or just misleading people but yet the evidence, this isn't something that hasn't been proven over and over again. This isn't something that hasn't been admitted to by many in authority. Could you give me a short list just on those who have admitted that this is actually happening?
I have to back you off on that one.
Okay. I was thinking
one of any significant level in government or agencies that is admitted to this.
Well, I saw a CIA agent, John Brennan, who admitted that particles are being put into the atmosphere that actually reflect heat. Did you ever?
We may need to do this. We may become desperate enough to do this, but that was not an outright admission. But the fact that he had to do some damage control and state that, gee, we could, that's a very big red flag. And again, as far as actual proof of these programs being ongoing, I ask people to search Geoengineering Watch, massive Senate document, presidential documents. Search that data, and you'll see the historical record of this going on since just after World War II. So, again, it's not speculation. The proof is there.
Right.
As far as any actual on-the-record admission by an official like Brennan or like John Holdren, former Obama science advisor, who also stated on the record, we may have to do this, we could, we might. It's ludicrous not to admit to it, but we have all of academia pretending this is not going on. We have the largest scientific panel ever created on any subject in human history, the IPCC.
Right. Well, it's like a
just pretending this isn't already going on.
It's like an elephant in the room, and it's almost like people just know you're not supposed to talk about it. And as I mentioned before, I've mentioned that I met with the state senator, and he was talking about introducing me to the caucus, and then told me what topics to stick with, which was the economy and jobs. And when I said, well, what if I speak on controversial topics? And one of those was geoengineering, though I admit I didn't quite use that term. And his response was, what's that? I don't know what it is, so it's not important. You know, I spoke to other assembly people and even another person who's running for governor, and they say that they don't know anything about it. Or I've heard one person actually admit, a representative who we have, admit that he has heard about it, but he hasn't researched it. And that, to me, was also, that was a red flag to me, because if you hear about something that relates to poisons being put in the atmosphere, that it's horrifically detrimental to the health of the people, and you don't research it, what kind of representation is that?
Well, it's the kind we have. And as I've told you, and I've announced, many times previously, the meetings I've had at the state capitol, with Congressman, with Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, with EPA people, it's with the California Energy Commission, who, by the way, in regard to the California Energy Commission, I attended a meeting in 2009, presented data to their top scientists. At that meeting, the California Energy Commission in Sacramento voted for and approved and purchased a $200,000 spectrometer from Scripps Institute for the purpose of identifying the chemical composition and origin of particulates of unknown origin that was costing the state 20 to 40% of its rainfall. And by the way, those who don't understand this, they are not seeding to make it rain. That is not what's going on here. Solar radiation management diminishes rainfall horrifically. So that spectrometer that was purchased in 2009 has never been seen or heard from since, swept under the rug, like every other solid piece of it, or solid attempt to disclose this issue. No,
I appreciate it, but I heard, on seeding clouds, what I've heard is that that some ski resorts will actually pay company to come in, or whoever it is, the organization, to actually seed the clouds and cause it to snow. Are you saying that's not accurate?
What I'm saying is this, that is not geoengineering. That is not geoengineering, and people need to look at that as what it is. It's a red herring to distract people from geoengineering. So the kind of weather modification you're talking about, which is a single-engine prop airplane in many cases that carries some flares on the wings, compare the amount of material dispersed by some flares trapped on the wings of a single-engine prop-driven aircraft to a military tanker like a KC-135 that can carry at lower altitudes up to 100 tons of material.
Right,
We're
right.
negating any of the surface, quote, weather modification programs that seem very benign to people. That is not geoengineering, and those programs are allowed to continue and go on because it makes people think that that's all that's going on in our skies.
Right.
It could not be further from the truth. So we can't confuse the two.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually what I had thought. I thought the idea that geoengineering is so, I mean, the idea that that particles are being put up in the air, in the atmosphere, to reflect heat, to keep the Earth from warming. It just, to me, it doesn't even make sense. It's like lunacy. It sounds, frankly, it just sounds idiotic to me. I mean, how in the world can you keep putting particles that come down to this Earth and destroying the Earth and poisoning the people with the idea that we're just reflecting heat to protect the Earth? That argument just seems like it's just crazy, actually. And but then when you hear about seed cloud or whatever they call it, I thought that even that was just somehow a ruse to take the idea, the notion away that there would be an attempt to put metals in the air to reflect the heat, because that, I mean, when you really think about it, doesn't that to me, and again, I'm relatively new at this compared to you, but that just sounds very stupid. I mean, poison, putting these toxins into our atmosphere, and I mean, how much of these toxins do you have to put up there? Metals do you have to put up to actually effectively release, to reflect the heat, and at the cost of poisoning our planet?
Let's try to put this into context. First, in regard to your last statement, how much are we talking about here? Let's look at the stated goals of the most recognized geoengineers on the planet, like Dr. David Keith from Harvard. His stated goal was to put 10 to 20 million tons of nanoparticulates, which are exponentially more harmful than particulates in the micron size, which is all that's being measured for. Nanoparticulates are unimaginably small, so they're bioavailable. They completely permeate the web of life, including us, through our lungs, through our olfactory nerves, highly toxic. Why would they use aluminum? The stated purpose of the geoengineers, because it has a higher reflectivity, which is the albedo, and a lower coagulation rate. The particles don't clump together, so they stay aloft a little bit longer. Do they care about the consequences? No. At minimum, they don't care. And at maximum, the fact that the population is literally getting dumber by the day from exposure to these particles. And we're not guessing, by the way, for your listeners. This is not theory, hypothesis, or conjecture. I say this all the time so people understand. We're not guessing. We have lab tests. We have 70-plus lab tests from Northern California and Oregon alone. The amount of aluminum coming down through our air column is absolutely staggering. And for those who say it should be there, that's also not true. Aluminum does not exist in free form in the environment. It has to be mined, refined, and sprayed. It should not be there. We also have other metals like mercury. We all have mercury in us. Every single one of us has mercury in us, from coal-fired power plants, perhaps from our amalgam fillings. The combination of those two
vaccinations
metals creates synergistic toxicity, which increases the overall toxicity as much as 100 times, 10,000%.
Right.
So, but you have to look at the overall picture of the why again, and we're back to the state of the biosphere. For those who choose to think or believe that nothing's wrong with the planet except climate engineering, for those who understand climate engineering is going on, that's not true. And if you look at through the lens of the climate engineers in the military-industrial complex, whose goal it is to keep business as usual as long as possible, thus the created engineered cooldowns. Why would they engineer a cooldown? And they can. And yes, geoengineering makes the overall warming of the planet worse, not better, the overall warming. But they can create radical short-term toxic cooldowns with chemical isonucleation elements. Why? Because that continues the confusion and division in the population in regard to the true extent of climate damage. Thus, nobody really seems to be able to want to figure out what's going on. If they see a radical cooldown, if they see it snowing in the Sahara Desert, you saw that recently, right, didn't you? It snowed in the Sahara Desert. Did you see that headline?
No, frankly, I didn't.
So they do that on purpose. Even if it's 45 degrees and snowing, and the chemical isonucleation elements can cause that. it creates a headline that makes a lot of people who don't want to believe there's anything wrong with the climate jump up and down and see, I knew there was nothing wrong. I hate Al Gore. I'm going to take the opposite position of everything he says. And even though I don't like Al Gore either, and he's a shamster and a hypocrite, but that doesn't change reality. So even though we have people making money, like Mr. Gore, off the climate problem, that doesn't mean it's not real. Climate engineering is a huge part of that problem. So what I'm suggesting to people, please don't believe me. Don't believe you. I don't want them to believe you, Austin, or me. What I want them to do, if they care at all about the truth, and most people claim to, though they don't show it with their actions, do some real research. Do some real research on this issue, and you won't like what you find.
Right, and that's been my continually from the very beginning, even starting to run, do our due diligence. That's our responsibility. We're not in a time anymore in a place where we can just trust, not that we ever were, but certainly today I think that we've come to realize that mainstream media is not serving the interests of the people and sticking to its code of ethics in terms of reporting the news, but now we're just seeing narratives and editorializing and really representing special interest in terms of the information that we're getting. It's just not unbiased information, but meant to actually keep us in the dark. So let me ask you this now. It's interesting, but when you can have university libraries, etc., and compared to what we have on the internet and what actually populates, have you found that even through some of the what's it called? The searches, the search engines like Google or Chrome, etc., that often that what's populated to the top is really not meant to lead us to truth, but really lead us away or misrepresent. We're not that we have to dig pretty deep in order to find what we're looking for.
Yes, and that requires a certain amount of diligent investigation so you can determine and discern what's valid and what's not. And yes, we see this all the time. We have people with our YouTube posts, for example, that say YouTube is not allowing them to share it. On Facebook, it's not going out in the news feeds. Absolutely, they're controlling this. We have YouTube counts. We did a separate YouTube counter page that, in one particular instance, with 40,000 people visiting the page, 40,000 plus, YouTube counted only 1,100 of those 40,000. That's a pretty big miss, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, it's up to people to understand their reality is not going to be the same much longer. That's a given. If we're going to salvage anything of Earth's life support systems, it has to start by stopping climate engineering. That is the single greatest leap we could take forward. If we can do that, we have a long list of other challenges to face. We have, from the Fukushima that's already going to many more Fukushimas that are likely coming, we have an unimaginably long list of challenges, and we're talking about existential threats here. And if I may, Austin, let me tie geoengineering into Fukushima. Right now, and the collapsing ozone layer. As geoengineering as the single greatest factor destroying ozone, and I'm not stating there's not other factors, chlorofluorocarbons and other anthropogenic factors are definitely a part of the ozone destruction. But mathematically, climate engineering is the biggest part that's not being acknowledged. So, weaving this back into what I stated, as our atmosphere is damaged, if we have a very large Carrington event, a large solar flare, coronal mass ejection, CME, that's going to knock out grids around the globe. When that happens, we're going to have many nuclear plants that can't cool themselves. Now we have lots and lots of Fukushimas. Game over. Again, from every direction.
And what about
engineering is absolutely pulling the noose around our collective necks, right down to every breath we take, which you mentioned several times, and you're correct to do so. How long can people hold their breath? If we can't breathe without sucking these materials in, and it's making us less cognitively functional by the day, we won't be able to face any of these challenges, none.
Right.
I ask the people to investigate this. I spent 15 years of my life, put my life on hold, gone through my entire SEP retirement account. I sold resources to go on this battle because I'm not going to need them where we're headed.
Right.
We're not going to have the paradigm we all thought we were going to have. If we have anything, it's because we all pulled together and salvaged what was left of Earth's life support system.
Right. My concern, I've heard this, I've never given it a second thought. You hear things and it just sounds, it's just ridiculous when you hear it. But one of those terms was the zombie apocalypse. And it wasn't really until I started following, really what's going on with a lot of the stuff, and kind of mixing something else, but with the stuff that they're putting in vaccines, even in children who don't develop an autoimmune or develop a immune system until the 24 months, and yet they're giving these newborns injections that are toxic and that break that protective barrier to the brain. And so, and then you see these things that they're putting in the air through this geoengineering. It seems to me like we can have a pretty dumbed down society, really, because it's like we don't even have a say so of how much is being put up in the air. It's like whoever they are, they can spray as much and as little as they want, and the people are doing nothing about it. And they can increase the toxins, minimize. They're basically in full control of we the people in terms of what we ingest, and we have no rights at this point, though we're supposed to by law, to tell them to stop.
This is, again, it's the implied public consent when there's no response. And the public so far has chosen not to respond. They'd rather stay on their iPhones and continue to go about their business. So when people say to me it's all the fault of those in power, I would argue that. We have a population that deserves an immense amount of blame for what's happening because they refuse to investigate, they refuse to look at the facts, they refuse to get past their ideology claiming that, quote, again, they would never do this to us, therefore I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Or they pretend that some agency somewhere is keeping an eye on everything.
Right.
From the truth. The agencies are designed to mask what's happening, to hide the crimes of the power structure, not to disclose them. I've been in an EPA meeting in Sacramento, arranged by a congressional rep, 5 top EPA people, told to my face the entire system is rigged, that they're told to test for combustion particulates only. Every other part of the sample goes out the window, literally.
Right.
Now let's look at the air testing equipment. At best, air quality testing tests for PM 2.5 microns. Generally, it's PM10, 4 times larger. But we're talking about nanoparticulates that are exponentially smaller than PM 2.5. They go completely under the radar, and in addition, they're not testing for that type of element.
Wow.
The bottom line is the effort to cover this up has been going on for decades.
Right.
And the severity of what we face now is immense. And for those who think, again, that we can resolve some issue and everything will go on as normal, not going to happen.
Right.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the human race has crashed at the guardrail. We're plummeting to the bottom of the canyon. If we're able to salvage anything, it's going to start with stopping this assault on the planet's life support systems and human health, and that's climate engineering. It's not just climate engineering. It's over-the-horizon radar enhancement. It's biological warfare. The nature of these particulates makes it biological warfare. It has to be looked at as all of those things, but the bottom line is for people, credibility. Many people who claim to be trying to expose this issue are not taking the time to stand on solid, credible facts delivered in a professional manner. Without that, we are not going to gain credibility.
Right. Well, what do you think about this? Because I have just a couple more questions, and I really appreciate you taking this time, and then see if some of the people listening here have questions. But do you think that we can reach that point of critical mass, if you will, where people, because again, it's we the people, we're the ones who are providing the labor. I mean, we are those in military, we are those in healthcare, we are those who are flying those planes, spraying that, we the people. Do you think that we can achieve a place where people's eyes open up and they start realizing, you know what, I cannot do this, and that in that, when we have that collective effort, that we, the people, can come against this monster or tell, the powers that be, no more, we're not putting up with it, you are not going to spray our skies anymore.
The only way forward is to reach a critical mass of awareness, and I get messages from lots of people saying, just tell us how to fix it, as if there's some silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. Our legal team, geoengineeringwatch.org, our legal team, we've already filed legally in Canada. We filed in the U.S. against the Department of Commerce because they're the overseeing agency for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who is not giving us our FOIA requests, our Freedom of Information Act requests, which are legally required to give us, and they're giving us nothing, stonewalling us.
Wow.
And even our legal efforts are ultimately about raising public awareness, reaching a critical mass of awareness.
Right.
And when that happens, when we have military personnel and their families, more importantly their families of elected officials, friends of elected officials and military personnel, understanding that these programs are nothing short of omnicidal, total planetary extinction. They must be stopped. We can only stop them from the inside out. We can't go up against the U.S. military. We need them on our side. They're supposed to be on our side, are they not? They're supposed
Right,
to be.
absolutely. We're not representing. Someone asked me to ask you, I think if I caught it correctly, where is the point of no return?
We're past the point of no return.
Okay.
We are past the point of no return to a planet the planet we had formerly known, the thriving planet. Even if we stopped everything right now, every form of human activity, damage to the planet, the momentum behind what has already occurred will likely take millions of years to recover an equilibrium. That's a long time, and we base this on past paleo events. We have the Pedum event 55 million years ago, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, one of Earth's epochs, mass extinction from methane expulsion. And this is important to weave into this equation when people ask why. Methane. We're not talking about cow and livestock flatulence, although the livestock industry is very harmful to the planet because they're cutting down forests, turning it into grassland. We're talking about formerly frozen sea-based methane deposits. Austin, you know ships have been sinking in the Bermuda Triangle for going on
Long
about
time.
3/4 of a century, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's methane expulsion causing that. It's seabed deposits of methane that are thawing and releasing. What happens then? It aerates the water like a bottle of champagne. The vessels have no buoyancy, and thus they sink to the bottom intact. And the methane then migrates into the atmosphere and starts to surround the planet like a layer of glass. And methane is the most powerful greenhouse gas in any abundance. It's 100 to 120 times more potent than CO2 over a 100-year time horizon. But the scientific world, again, is not admitting that. So the methane is blowing out of the Arctic as well. I would challenge your listeners to search Siberian methane craters, and they will be shocked at what they see, absolutely shocked. What looks like giant bomb craters in the tundra, and this is methane exploding into the atmosphere, and they should be alarmed about this. So we have methane now covering the planet like a layer of glass. It's trapping the heat, and that's why we see nighttime lows rising twice as fast as daytime highs. Back to climate engineering and the engineered cool downs. In the attempt to mask this problem, the climate engineers are making it worse, much like a pharmaceutical for the human body. Austin, you've seen how many pharmaceutical commercials that once they name the symptom they claim to treat, they name the side effects, which sound so unimaginably horrific you can't imagine anybody with a drug, right?
Right.
And the next commercial is an attorney saying you can sue if you took less pharmaceutical.
Right.
So this is their attempt to hide the problem from the population as long as possible, keep business as usual as long as possible.
Right.
In the course of hiding it, the materials they're using are making the population less cognitively functional, makes them easier to control.
Right.
But we are on the fast track, back to the point of no return. We're on the fast track to a planet that does not support life.
Right.
It's called Venus Syndrome. Your listeners can look this up. Just search geoengineeringwatch.org Venus Syndrome. So, the bottom line, back to the non-linear equation. We're not talking about millions of years from now ending in that state. We're talking about unimaginably soon. In a state where the planet is a lifeless ball of superheated rock.
And by the way, on a kind of on a side note, based on an example you used, but when we see these pharmaceutical commercials, the pharma commercials, and they're listing all this stuff that can go wrong, and then you have attorneys advertising that if this has happened to you, the interesting thing, by the way, and you're probably aware of this, Dane, is that Congress made it a law, if these drugs are in the form of a vaccine, these pharmaceutical companies are indemnified. And so they're in the process, the pharma, of creating 270 new vaccines. And these are really the very pills and drugs, a lot of them are, that they would have been held responsible for. But now when they come in the form of vaccine, basically Congress has completely indemnified the pharmaceuticals. So we can just, it's what's happening is extraordinarily egregious, and the representation of the people is no more. And I want to ask you, you're over there in a beautiful part of California, and I heard, and I've repeated it often, and going to have you correct me here publicly, but I heard that the aluminum levels at Shasta Mountain have been discovered to be 10,000 times higher than normal.
Well, yeah, they're even worse than that. That's based on one particular test was 61,000 ppb parts per billion of aluminum. We shouldn't really see over 1. So
61,000?
1 ppm.
Wow.
ppb, excuse me, not part per million, but parts per billion. So
Yeah.
we're unimaginably higher. I mean, that's it's highly toxic snow. I just did another test for Mount Shasta that was just under 1,000 ppb parts per billion.
Wow.
But again, should not be there. And the first test I did, first rain test, when I didn't want to believe this, again, my background in solar, I felt I should have known this was going on if it really was. I began to test for the elements listed in climate engineering patents, aluminum being a primary element. My initial baseline test, which is what we've used for baseline, 7 parts per billion. Talked to a hydrogeologist as soon as I did that test, and
Right.
he was afraid of this issue, and it was clear he knew about the issue, didn't want to get involved. But he made it clear also that I should not have more than 1 ppb in my filtered forested location. So even the first test was
Right.
700% higher than it should have been. Subsequent tests over the next 12 months in my area saw a single rain event of 3,450 ppb.
Right.
That's almost a 50,000% increase over what I already got that was high.
Right.
So this is highly toxic.
Well,
Let me bounce back on the vaccinations if I could clarify one
Okay,
thing
sure.
to back up what you said.
Sure.
When people think that those in power are in any way trying to be benevolent, that couldn't be further from the truth. So the vaccinations for the African children, peer-reviewed study now proves the vaxxed kids, the ones that have been vaccinated, 5 times more likely to die in the first 5 months. 500% more mortality.
Wow.
How could that be good for us? Let's look at the vaxxed kids now we have here, peer-reviewed study. 30 times more likely to have allergies. That's 3,000%.
Right.
The list of horrific effects is immense, and yet we live in a society that refuses to look at the facts. They refuse to
Right.
stop and think about putting aluminum and mercury in vaccinations and injecting them into our children. It has to
Right.
cause harm.
Right.
You can avoid the vaccinations if you try hard enough, at least for the moment. You
Right.
can't avoid breathing.
Right. No. Right. Exactly. It is, and even there, I mean, it's like they're assaulting us in the air, and but even now, you know, the incumbent I'm running against, he's feverishly moving towards passing even laws so that you and I would have to get a flu vaccination, which contains mercury. So
They
it's
know that the current paradigm cannot be maintained much longer. They're pumping up the stock market. It's a completely fictitious card house.
yes, it is.
It takes for people to see that and understand that.
Well,
Reporting right now, and I think you can tell, Austin, I'm not pulling these facts and figures out of thin air.
Yep.
I know my data. We're importing right now over $20 billion worth of food every year to stock U.S. shelves up from countries that are literally starving to death. Again, to pacify the American population until the last possible moment. If we don't wake up now, if we don't wake up and turn this tide by raising a critical mass of awareness, starting with the climate engineering issue, we're done. It's that
Right.
simple.
Right.
And I mean in the very, very near term. And the power structure, when they know the population can no longer be kept in the dark, when people wake up, that's when they will be the most dangerous of all. They will
Right.
likely create some immense false flag, create global conflict.
yeah. Oh, so you.
Perhaps they might release a pathogen. If we look at how harmful these pathogens are, or these materials are that are already coming down through the air column, already
Right.
extremely dangerous materials,
Right.
but they have the full spraying apparatus set up. If they feel too pushed into a corner, Austin, what would prevent them from putting something more lethal in that mix? And
Exactly.
leveling the playing field overnight?
That's what I've been saying exactly. Just you're right. I mean, we have no say over it. We don't know what they're even put in it, but exactly as we start to wake up, they can increase, you know, the toxins going in. I'm going to throw a curveball a little bit, and don't answer if, of course, you know that as we're talking if you don't want to, because I know it's outside maybe area, or maybe not. Maybe you've seen it. But what about?
Fire away.
Okay, what about these cell towers, these 5G cell towers that are going in. To me, they look like they're a whole lot more powerful than what telecommunications even requires.
You're 100% correct. So what we see, that's somewhat in my arena of background. I have friends who work in the industry. Those towers, in most cases, have a service entrance, their power entrance, that will supply 10 times more power than they need for cell phone repeating. Why are they there? Because they are part of the climate engineering apparatus. These transmissions, they're radio frequency microwave transmissions, and they are used to manipulate the particulates. These are electrically conductive particulates. So when you see those herringbone patterns in the cloud, very uniform cloud formations,
Wow.
we have the paid liars at the Weather Channel telling us our, quote,
Wow.
gravity waves. If you know what a gravity wave is, you know how absurd that statement is from the paid liars at the Weather Channel, who are paid to, again, pacify the populations. But those
Right.
powers we know are being used for climate modification because we can see the effect on precipitation maps. They cause the particulates to scatter in every direction. That's too many condensation nuclei, too many little particles for the water to it combines those, and so the droplets can't form a big enough drop to fall as rain, so it migrates that moisture immense distances without it falling. So when we have a storm now coming into the west, we typically see forecasts like, instead of rain, 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 which we got in my region of Northern California, and then the forecast would say every day, rain, rain, rain. Now what's it say? Chance of showers, few showers, afternoon drizzle. Because almost nothing is falling. They're
Right.
migrating it further inland, creating the biggest cloud cover area they can, back to solar radiation management.
Right.
And thus they can then cause that moisture to fall where they choose to make it fall, like Winter Storm Jackson, which is happening right now. Theatrically named, quote, winter storm. And think
Right.
about the absurdity of this. With temperatures in the 50s and 60s on one side of the storm, with thunderstorms and something you'd see in maybe, late fall. And we have snow on the other side. We saw temperatures in South Carolina
Right.
about a week ago. It was literally, you could ride a bicycle from 60 degrees to snow.
Right.
How can that be? We saw temperatures in the last 2 weeks on several occasions. We saw in
Right.
New Orleans and Florida colder temperatures on the surface than Alaska and Siberia.
Right.
And the Weather Channel and other disseminating agencies don't talk about the fact that
Right.
there's T-shirt weather in Alaska in the middle of winter in places because they don't want you to know that. And that cold is a very shallow surface layer of cold. Pilots we're communicating to, commercial and private, are seeing nothing but far above normal temperatures at altitude. It's getting worse rapidly.
Right,
I mean,
right.
staggeringly high temperatures.
Right.
So the bottom line is, it's to try to pacify populations, ongoing weather warfare. We didn't talk about that, but to make mention of this statistic, every single Middle Eastern country that the U.S. has toppled and destabilized since 9/11, every single one has undergone a once-in-a-1,000-year drought that destabilized that nation.
Wow.
And that's not an accident.
Wow.
We have the drought-making capability of climate engineering is immense for the reasons I just mentioned, how they can migrate moisture right across us. And we have the leaders of some of those countries, in the case of Iran, on the floor of the UN, stating publicly, on the record, that their nation was having its rain cut off by NATO weather modification programs.
Wow.
Weather warfare.
Wow. It's just really, I'm sorry for reporting because I know, you go through, there's a grieving process, when you're struck with reality, because I know I started to feel like I woke up into the twilight zone. It was like, what is going on? This can't be real. I spoke to someone and he said to say hello to you from Scotland. His name is Colin. And he was telling, and then someone corroborated, another person from Scotland, but he was telling me the other day that they don't even have seasons anymore in Scotland, and the spraying is just nonstop. And it even, one of the spraying one year produced a familiar smell from the year before, and Colin recalled telling his fiance, when we smelt this last year, we got the flu. He says, watch and see if we don't end up getting the flu. And they did get the flu. And so why is that happening? And that's going to happen here, but why are they not seeing seasons?
Well, again, let's back up to the flu question first. At minimum, these particles are highly inflammatory to the respiratory system, so they trigger a whole host of effects that they're exacerbating at minimum. And at maximum, we don't know what's in the mix that's coming down. In regard to seasons, again, we have a planet that's already been transformed to something very different than what it was. And the only thing creating, quote, winter in many regions right now is patented processes of chemical ice nucleation for
Right,
weather modification. That's why we have, for those that haven't seen it, challenge your listeners to look this one up.
Right.
Search Ice Balls Lake Michigan. Have you seen those, Austin? The perfectly spherical ice balls washing up on the shores of Lake Michigan in recent years?
No, I haven't.
Listeners should look that up because the pictures will shock them. And they can find it at geoengineeringwatch.org if they search
Right.
chemical ice nucleation. Geoengineeringwatch.org, chemical ice nucleation. They'll find articles, posts, data that will shock them. So my question is this. How do we have up to 75-pound, perfectly spherical frozen ice balls? Why do we have them to begin with any surface temperatures of the water?
Right.
But let alone Lake Michigan, when this just occurred about a week and a half ago, 45-degree average temperatures of the water. Mm-hmm. Why do we have any ice on that water? Boston Harbor, did you just see recently where the media was making a big deal out of the ice on Boston Harbor? Did you see that?
You know, you've asked me these questions. You know, I came out of the media once upon a time.
Okay.
I don't watch the mainstream media anymore. And lately, as I've been focusing on these things, I've just, so no. That was a long no.
I'm trying to make the point that chemical ice nucleation can cause a freeze of material that should not freeze otherwise. And so in Boston, we had frozen sea surfaces, a lot of media hype about that again to confuse the population, with ocean temperatures that were 40 degrees plus. And for those that don't know, seawater freezes at 28.6 degrees. So why in the world would there be frozen material on the sea surface?
Wow.
It's chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. So back to your question as to why no seasons. It appears from the data we have that we are already past 3.5 degrees C of warming. This is not about Al Gore. It's not about carbon credit shams.
Surely.
It's about reality,
Right.
which climate engineering is making worse overall. So, in order to create these winter weather whiplash cooldowns, they're using chemical ice nucleation. So, how can we have a season when we have a planet that's been already radically altered, and
Right.
these very environmentally destructive short-term whiplash cooldowns is
Right.
unimaginably hard on the environment, not to mention toxic. So, you know, again, the bottom line, we are in uncharted territory.
Truly. Where is there any place in the world that is a haven so that we can all go move there?
No.
Okay. I want to play something. I think it's appropriate if you can hang in there. This is not very long, and I'm going to put it up on my wall, but I would like to share it. Is that okay? I feel like it'd be good timing, but I want you to see and hear. Plus, they're not able to see you, and they can see you here. But Dane bring this up to his congressman, and I actually know this person. I've spoken at the same event where he spoke, and really this is the kind of thing that we end up coming across. So let me put this on for you. I wasn't sure if I was going to put it on, but I think that it'll be a telltale here.
A week ago about solar radiation management.
Here, let me get that.
Hi, Doug. Dane Wigington here. We spoke a week ago about solar radiation management. I have something to pass on to you which you requested a week ago. If I could just explain to you what
Hopefully
it is
you
for
can
about
see it.
30 seconds, and I'll ask you a question. This is data from California EPA confirming aluminum contamination in waterways throughout California. This is from Cal EPA. There's about 26 lab tests in here confirming that there is aluminum, barium, strontium in our air. What we're all breathing here, we're all exposed to. We face a lot of legitimate challenges here. I agree with you. I agree with a lot of points brought up, but I would ask anybody in the room, what challenges will we face if we're inhaling aluminum on a day in, day out basis? If our streams are contaminated with aluminum, how can we prepare when our soils no longer grow properly, when we have a UV issue that's off the charts? So when we have Cal EPA stating that this is not in their jurisdiction, these climate modification programs that are absolutely going on, we have CARB saying not in their jurisdiction, Shasta County saying not in their jurisdiction. I would like to ask, since we know these programs are...
Maybe the federal EPA, because they're trying to take over every mud puddle and ditch and backyard pond in the world. So maybe somebody will find it. Right?
It is part of it. Water rights are being pursued, and we know the drought is a 2 + 2 = 4 equation. We have the satellite imagery to prove it up. So I'm going to hand this data off to you. I have a copy for you and for your staff. My question would be this: since everybody is passing the buck here, will your office address the fact that we have an absolute, positively, like a heavy metal contamination issue that cannot be disputed? It's a public health hazard. We have a UV radiation issue that's so intense it's burning the bark off of trees. All appear to be related to these climate modification programs, but these issues are indisputable public health hazards. Since nobody else will address it, will your office address it? I'm asking you.
I'm grateful for your providing and following up with the information on that. And we have the video, we have that, and I just got to look and see what's real on the thing, because peer reviewed.
It's state California, unless you think that they're not worthy of the title they have. We have confirmation here from California EPA on contaminated waterways with aluminum. And they do not know the source. They won't test the rainwater. Apparently they don't know where runoff comes from. So, we have the lab test to back it up.
Yeah, they only know that they need to take all of it. But yes, we'll take a hard look at that and see where to go with it. Because again, we all know it's a tough.
Last statement, I have free DVDs. This is a brand new version of a DVD that has a Shasta County presentation and 2 other presentations. It's free. Anybody in this room who wants a DVD, please take that. And I'm saying every day matters. Every single day we're breathing this stuff in. And we have I think someone here that'll read a statement from the North State neurologist that says he's being inundated with Alzheimer's, dementia patients, absolutely inundated, directly related to aluminum. So I would just ask again, what challenges can we face if we're not thinking clearly enough to do anything? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
See how he responds.
Because what we need to know is if it's happening the way that you're bringing up here, then where is it coming from? Where's the program that's doing it? Who's funding it? How is it happening? And these are things we have to have, be able to point to, because you know how everybody looks at it.
I happen to think that Mr. Wadington.
Should I play Terry here?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey Terry, I thought that was Terry next to
What
you.
he just said is pretty valid, and I think that the answer we got is that it will be looked into. The only one quick thing I do want to say is that a lot of issues that have been looked into in the past, such as the issue with, say, the veterans and their mistreatment, that's been happening for 50 years.
So you might be finished up with that issue now, but
I don't.
bottom line with Mr. LaMalfa.
Yeah, that was Congressman LaMalfa,
Yes.
and you asked him if his office would address it. And it wasn't very direct. It was still vague, like, well, wherever it's coming from, we don't know where it's coming from. But you were providing hard facts for him. And what has been the result so far?
Nothing. And I had long since provided hard facts to him, which he never acted on. I had to confront him publicly, so he couldn't pretend he didn't get those facts. So let me call Mr. LaMalfa what he is, like so many other elected officials, a liar and a coward. That's exactly what he is.
Right.
So that's the kind of people that are running our governmental system. All of them are a part of it. In the case of Doug LaMalfa and his aides, as I told you off the air, they were calling me at home, livid about the climate engineering issue. They were calling me at home on the weekends. And when they got the word from up the ladder to leave this issue alone, total about-face, Mr. LaMalfa was lying in that recording. He never looked into anything, despite the fact that I gave him credible data from EPA. And the meeting before that, a week before that confrontation you just played the recording on, I confronted him at another public town hall meeting where he said, well, bring me data from a source I recognize as credible, and then I'll look into it. Of course, that was another lie, which you saw. I served up data from EPA, and he never did anything. So the bottom line is, if people in our communities, in our societies, want to pretend that someone somewhere is looking out for us, that couldn't be further from the truth. And if we remain in that mindset, we remain sitting on the bench, and we do nothing. And in the words of Edmund Burke, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, good men and women in this case. And that's exactly where we're headed. What I want to state again, emphatically for the record, share credible data. And the single most condensed summary, fact and photo summary we have, and there's a free downloadable link for people on this. You can do this. You can share this link from your own home computer, not go anywhere, not spend a nickel. The 20-page fact and photo summary on the home page of geoengineeringwatch.org is we feel the single most effective, most condensed summary link you can share or summary material you can share to wake people up. If that 20-page fact and photo summary booklet doesn't wake them up, they're not willing to wake up.
Right.
There's photographs there, NASA satellite imagery that is so incredibly shocking. You don't need to know anything about meteorology, weather, anything. When you see square clouds or the type of radio frequency patterns we have captured, you don't need to know anything about this issue to know that that's wrong. That's a manipulated climate. And the facts and data that's presented in that very condensed booklet are, we feel, the most compelling and most effective of all. I would challenge anybody to help share that. Share credible data. If you want to wake people up, you can't just rant and rave and point at the sky. You have to stand on credible ground, credible information, and share credible data.
Right. Outstanding. I really, really appreciate the information that you've shared, and it is, frankly, it's quite frightening. It's disconcerting, but so grateful, because what your information that's poignant and really jars. I think that it's jarring us, the people, out of our complacency and obstinance, and really will bring us to a place, because, as I've said, that this has to be a movement by the people. It has to be the people, because if the people sit back and just think that representatives are going to be the ones to make a change, one or two, you've just demonstrated that, and I've witnessed it, that most representatives either they're not speaking about it because they're bought, or they're afraid to, or intimidated, whatever the situation is, and the people must stand and get louder and be willing to take action. And that's just the way it is. That they've got to get behind the people. And so,
got to get behind you.
Thank you.
If we have someone like you that's willing to face this issue and deal with the blowback, and instead of running for cover, you're not running for cover. You're trying to pull back the covers, to pull back
Yes.
the curtain. And so people need to stand around someone like yourself who's willing to call it what it is. And on this final point, people should keep in mind, and they can search this. I'm not asking anybody to believe me. I'm asking you to investigate what I state. We have the top U.S. military brass stating on the record that the disintegrating climate is the greatest national security threat of all. So I would ask your listeners or your followers or anyone else listening to this broadcast, knowing that the top U.S. military brass recognizes and acknowledges on the record the disintegrating climate, greatest national security threat of all, do we think that they would ask our permission before intervening with the climate and using it as a weapon? That's an absurd notion when we have historical data to prove they've been intervening with the climate for over 7 decades on a massive scale.
Right.
We need people to stop being naive, to use their sense of reason, support those who are willing to stand against the lies and deception as you are, and we need to do it now. We don't have tomorrow. We won't have tomorrow if we don't do it now.
Right. Well, thank you again very much. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm glad I played that video, because I hadn't seen it, and I was impressed by how you utilized those few moments you had, because it was a powerful statement. And again, it just really indicted our congressman there, and by completely ignoring it. So let's just see. I think that 2018 that we're going to do something here, Dane, and definitely want to again just to commend you and applaud you, because there's no doubt, based on the pushback that I've gotten and even the threats, there's no doubt that you're going to be under attack all the time. And so I'm grateful for people like you who stand for the truth, and despite even being a minority and being ostracized and threatened, that you're still standing and you're being a voice for the people. So again, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.
Honor was mine. I'm just trying to do my part as best I can. I will continue to until my last breath. I know you're trying to do your part, asking everyone else to please try and do theirs. That we are all a part of something bigger than ourselves. All of us are needed in this battle.
Yeah.
We're needed on the field now.
Yes.
Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. So I'll be in touch. Again, thanks, and have a great night, Dane.
You too. Take care.
Yee. It's like how much for for we truthers, I mean, how much can we endure, right? So, but I would rather hear it. I would rather hear the truth so that we can deal with it now rather than allow things to get worse. And so we recognize that we have a government that certainly has gone astray, and so we have to come together. And I think that as we move forward for 2018, that we need the people to be rallying and unlike before and be willing, as I said, and that we have to be willing to take action and to take force, because we, the people, do not consent to being poisoned. So anyway, have a good night, and thank you for joining me.